Story 1. I went to jail for about 3 weeks because I was driving with a suspended license. We all slept in these huge rooms with a bathroom and living area connected. About a week in, I hear some guy get up and use the small microwave that we are given in the living area to make stuff hot, like ramen. It's not normal for the microwave to be used after lights out, but I figured maybe he had a roll or something he wanted to heat up and munch on before sleeping. The guard posted on the far wall never said anything to him or even got up from his seat, though I could tell from my bunk he was watching the inmate. So the guy comes back to the bed area and walks right past me with this bowl in his hands. I close my eyes and try to go to sleep, but the silence is shattered by this blood-curdling scream from a couple rows down. The screams aren't easy to forget. It sounded like it hurt worse than when I had kidney stones. And holy crap, man, I literally thought I might be dying and told my older brother I loved him in case I died. Those are painful, but I imagine that man went through much worse, especially including recovery time. The guy had a bowl filled with baby oil, heated it till it was boiling, and then poured it on some guy in his sleep. I found out later that they had some kind of fight a few days earlier and the baby oil guy was out for revenge. The burn guy had third-degree burns, the baby oil guy was taken away and we never heard from him again. He was moved to a different part of the county immediately. We never saw him again. Also, we lost our microwave, so to heat things up, we had to use hot water from the sink and just let stuff sit in it forever to heat it up. It really sucked for sure, but not as bad as being covered in boiling oil. Where on earth did he score the baby oil? Is there like a secret baby oil stash hidden somewhere in the slammer? Story 2. I spent a few years in a state prison and saw and heard a lot of brutal, crazy stories, but one thing that has never left me was a story a guy told me about his case. He was babysitting his new girlfriend's baby, a few months old, and the baby wouldn't stop crying, so he did the unthinkable and silenced it for good. That story really messed me up. Also, one of the bad ones I saw was a guy who got punctured with a bladed weapon, dropped, and expired instantly. He never saw it coming. A couple of people put him in a laundry cart and the commanding officers didn't find him for like 10 hours. The guy who ended his life was young and serving an 11-month sentence. He said he just wanted to know what it felt like to end someone's life. They convicted him federally and he got like 99 years. Unfortunately, there are a lot of young kids who go in with small sentences and just never get out. It is clearly not unfortunate for him though, but misdirection is big in prison. A young kid comes in and has no idea what to do, scared, timid, and just wants to do his time, right? Well, people know if you're scared and this stint isn't for you. Most physical violations aren't someone getting their behinds roughed up and violated. A lot of physical harm and people getting roughed up into comas are not what they seem either. Sometimes it's someone who misdirects them and next thing they know, they are paying debts to people or gangs. For example, a young kid comes in and gets roughed up by someone for looking at them wrong. A few people tell him, "We've got your back," and take this young kid under their wing, all the big setup. They feed him and hang with him and life is okay. Well, one day these people have an issue with another group of people and tell this kid that because they protect him and take care of him, he needs to do a favor for them and send him into someone's cell with a lock and a sock and hurt someone. Or make him get his visitor and bring him. Now that this kid is supposed to be out in 2 years, why would he do this? Most young people do not want to be on their own. A lot of them get accustomed to prison life and they look up and throw their entire lives away for nothing. I've seen people go into prison for something stupid, never do illegal substances or drink booze, come from good families, and leave full-blown heads with tattoos on their faces. It's sad. I'm not saying these are good people, I'm just saying the prison system is messed up. It's almost like this was the plan and they want and need you to come back. Anyway, to clarify, the weapon was shaped into a knife. In prison, anything can be made into a weapon. I don't know what this one was made of, but I've seen them made from melted plastic, copy machine parts, wood, and all kinds of stuff. So not what most people would consider a knife, more like a poker. Story 3. I didn't actually go to prison, but I spent a year in Los Angeles County Jail, which is infamous for being the suckiest system in the US. It sucks. It sucks terribly. It was my first week and I was sitting on my bunk when I suddenly heard what sounded like a rabbit going through something agonizing. It turns out a guy got caught stealing and was getting stomped out. I later found out he had stolen a ramen packet. What went through my mind was, these people are going to put this poor guy in a wheelchair for over $1? Not a pretty sight for a first-timer, but what I remember most was the screaming. I reiterate that it sounded just like a rabbit getting treated roughly, the poor guy left on a stretcher. I heard this one from an OG who's been in and out of the system, apparently upstate, prison. There's a guy from Grape Street Crip who went by the name Purple Passion. Supposedly, Purple Passion was a 6'3", 250-pound dude who, once he found someone he liked, he would knock out the unfortunate victim and reap the spoils. If he likes it, he'll leave an unwrapped and bitten Snickers bar. If not, then a wrapped Snickers bar. Now, what went through my mind was, how could someone be so cruel yet so considerate as to plant a Snickers afterward? I also heard of others going by a different name, Snickers Bandit and El Joto Magnifico Caliente. You can hear a popping sound, closest as I can remember, when someone is poked. The Asians, or others, used to have their own exclusive dorm, but that was revoked in the early 2000s when an inmate was harmed. I can't remember whether it was over a gambling dispute or if he was a kitty fiddler. Supposedly, there was an attempt to conceal the incident. They then stuffed the parts they couldn't flush down the toilet into a larger cart. Inmates are housed either in dorms, 60-foot by 90-foot rooms that hold 64 to 96 people, or in cells. I was housed in the former. So we're kept in these concrete boxes, and when a riot pops off due to interracial disputes, there's no place to escape when they start sending in tear gas grenades. If you ever find yourself in one, just smear baby oil or Vaseline on your face and wrap a wet towel or t-shirt around it. Harm against the young is frowned upon, even if consensual. There was this one guy, a first-timer like myself. He apparently gave illegal substances to a young girl and got with her. We're sitting in the day room and he's telling us this like it's something to brag about, and assuredly it got everyone's attention. There were two other guys he shared his cell with, both of who had come down from prison for an additional charge. After retiring to our cells, we hear a yell and a scuffle. It turns out Mr. Kitty Fiddler was getting his comeuppance and was being violated. The entire cell block was cheering this on. The raucousness eventually recedes, followed by silence. Slowly, the smell of crap just permeates throughout the block. From what I heard, he stayed under his bunk until the next shower day when he rushed out of his cell, begging the guards for help. Story 4. I was in a drunk tank one night in my freshman year of college. I didn't do anything besides being caught guilty of underage drinking. A guy that was there when I got there gets up after an hour or so of me coming in. He goes over and sits down on the toilet that is in the same small room as the 10 of us guys that were there, right in front of the window to the officer's desk area, or office, and has explosive diarrhea. It's horrible breathing through our shirts for 2 hours. A new guy comes in and is told by an experienced player that he should try to make himself throw up so that he won't be in as long. They release you when you're sober. So what did he do? He puts his drunken head into the toilet bowl, rests his face on the seat, passes out. It was a gross, gross day. This happened in Michigan, among other places. The punishment depends on who is making the complaint. By that, I mean which arm of the law. MSU campus police, my freshman year, were allowed to go up to people standing in line at the stadium, and if they appeared hammered at all, they were allowed to pull you out of line by the arm and confiscate your ID so that they could verify you're a minor before cuffing you and taking you to the drunk tank. A ticket and letting the person leave would be a liability for the school as well as the city. It's obviously a bad system, but it's the one they run with here. In Michigan, simple consumption is considered possession. You possess the booze in your tummy, and that's how they slap so many people with minor impossessions, MIPs, and you pay $350 to the courts and another $150 in probation fees over your 3-month court-forced sobriety testing. Who would have thought that a night in the drunk tank would turn out to be one of the wildest and grossest adventures one can have? I am officially staying away from booze from now on. Story 5. I was in a holding cell for unpaid tickets once. It was way overcrowded. They brought in a new guy who complained right as he entered. "Aw, hell no, there are too many people in here, man." He sat quietly for a few minutes while another inmate talked crap to the annoyance of most everyone else. Finally, the new guy, who was bigger than anyone in the cell and clearly the most veteran inmate, walked up to the talker guy. "Hey, sorry man, I ain't sitting here anymore. It's too crowded. You need to shut up." He then punched the talker guy in the face and then went to the door and started pounding it. "Guard, I just punched this dude. Come get me." The guards were already on their way, and as they pulled him out, he left with these words of wisdom and commands to the guards. "Y'all take me to solitary. I take the strike rap because it's too crowded and hot in there. It's inhumane to keep so many people in there. Take me to solitary." I envied his clever escape and reminded myself that I was only in there for a traffic ticket, and as much as solitude sounded like heaven, it might not be worth emulating his departure strategy. As for my charge, it was for failure to appear after I failed to pay the ticket and ignored the letter demanding I show up and explain to the judge why I didn't pay. The ticket has a statute of limitations, but failure to appear does not. I can be arrested for any amount of time after not paying a ticket for not going to see the judge. Story 6. When I was younger, I had a bit of a bad side and ended up in the garage for a 3-year sentence, which I only served for 18 months and got out on good behavior. My cellmate at the time was wee Davey. Davey was a quiet man usually, but this day he showed me a different side of him. A side that I think hadn't been seen since the day Davey made the mistake that put him in there. Well, that day, during sunlight, a guard who was spectating the tarmac made Davey feel like a kid with the way he spoke and picked on him in front of the rest of the boys. Davey afterwards told me that he was going to turn the bastard into a teabag. I didn't think he was talking sense, and I thought he would calm down with time. Not Davey, though. Nope, Davey didn't calm down and drop it. Davey waited 2 months. When the guard least expected it, Davey surprised the guard from behind when there were no other guards too close by. Davey waited until he crossed the yard and poked a rusty old screwdriver in his back. He poked him several times before he was tackled to the ground by another guard. I wonder what happened to Davey. As for the guard, I heard he survived but never came back to work. I'm not sure where Davey got the screwdriver, but people sneak things in at visits, and guys get along well with maintenance guys who accidentally leave their tools behind. Story 7. I was in juvenile prison. I had just gotten the intake unit. The guy that was escorted into the building behind me was a defiler. Well, we walked into the unit, and some black kid walked up to him and started roughing him up. He takes out a toothbrush and starts shoving it up the bum of the new guy. The commanding officers didn't let that go on for too long, but it caused some serious damage. Well, some guys from the unit that handles those types of crimes told me he crapped himself and couldn't control it. It turns out the guy who roughed him up was the older brother of the boy he defiled. What's interesting is that the prison guards seemed to know this and let the brother take his revenge. The door outside is right next to their booth, so they were literally 5 feet away. I just saw one guard with his hand on the emergency button, waiting to push it. Once he actually got the toothbrush up, the guy's bum was where they intervened. Even the guard seemed disturbed by seeing that. Now that is loyalty, and sometimes you gotta take unconventional measures just to show that. Now if you think that story is crazy, I've got even crazier ones, so make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more wild prison stories. Story 8. I've never been to prison, but when I worked in the ER, I saw a lot of prisoners come in with all sorts of injuries, but 2 really stood out. The first one was a guy who was struck in the abdomen and had a massive open wound. I remember he had a stoned face and wasn't saying anything, just looking straight ahead. I'm sure he had been given pain meds, but still. We slid him on the stretcher, and I remember I went to move him up in the bed a little bit, and as soon as I started to slide him up, he grabbed my arm and said, "Hold up a minute, homie, that hurts a little bit," in the most nonchalant voice I've ever heard. The second guy who tried to end himself by stripping and just lying on the cold floor for hours. The floor was so cold it ended up dropping his core temperature to around 92 degrees Fahrenheit. Story 9. My brother told me a story about pre-prison when he was in jail. He bunked with an illegal substance dependent who was seemingly just sick. He said he was moaning and groaning all night. He tried to tell the commanding officers he needed help, but they ignored him. They left him be. Then he threw up all over himself, and the commanding officers still wouldn't help him. They just left him there, all dirty. Then after a while, he started seizing. He had 2 seizures. The commanding officers did nothing. Again, they thought he was faking. My brother said that about an hour later, he stopped making noises. He was silent, so he checked on him. He was gray and unresponsive, and he just totally slipped away. The bastards let a technically innocent man pass away from benzo withdrawal overnight. I emphasized benzo withdrawal to clarify, and yes, people can most certainly die from benzo withdrawal. I'm not just talking nonsense, I swear. The commanding officers thought he was sick, but they neglected it and failed to admit him to the nurse and help him out. Story 10. One of the women I was with was in for life. The reason she was in was because someone had sold her fake snow, so she was going to end this person. So she goes to their house, cuts the gas line, and burns the house down. It turns out she had the wrong house and had swept off an entire family in their sleep. I don't think she felt bad about what she did either. She tried to punk me out a few times, but I don't take people seriously if we cannot communicate like intelligent human beings. She was obviously trying to avoid herself in all areas. It was sad. Story 11. There was a quiet kid we called Harry Potter because of his glasses. He was pretty young and definitely lacking in street smarts, and we could never figure out why he was there. Until we caught the news from a guard that he threw a pot of boiling hot water on his wheelchair-bound grandma because she was being too loud while he watched his favorite TV show. Out of all the sick things people were locked up for, that one is pretty hard to swallow. If you ever get locked up, remember to always be respectful of those around you because you never know what kinds of messed up people are in there with you. I used to think Hogwarts was this super secret school. Turns out it was just hiding in plain sight in the slammer. Story 12. Christmas time in jail, maybe around Christmas Eve, not sure now, many years ago. Around nighttime, 8 p.m. I guess. So they had these huts which could sleep about 20 guys each. I was in the short timers hut, and for some reason they called long timers long sweeps. I have no idea why. Anyway, a bunch of long sweepers started gathering around our hut just outside the chain link fence. Massive guys, tats on arms and even fingers, and all carrying a little something in their fist. The group gets up to about 12 guys, all standing around, silently saying nothing, and we are getting pretty nervous. Then, just as it gets dark, a couple of little possums crawl down out of one of the trees. Little Aussie sugar gliders. Yep, they can really fly, or at least glide between trees. Now here's a bunch of the biggest, baddest dudes I've ever seen standing around, waiting to hand feed little possums bread and sugar. They were very gentle with them. Story 13. I'm a Canadian, but I got caught up in the U.S. federal prison system, USP Atlanta. This place, my friends, is as nasty as it gets. A new fish came in, and after doing his obligatory time in the special housing unit, he got moved into my unit. When he arrived, he was asked if he had any contraband with him by some of the other brothers. He made a vital mistake by telling them no, but later opening up to his cellmate that he had some grass. In prison, it doesn't take long for the block to know what's going on, so the next morning, when this guy went to shower, he was jumped by half a dozen or so guys. They proceeded to fill up shampoo bottles with warm water and soap, then stuck them way up his behind in order to get the grass out. Although this would have definitely cleaned him out, it didn't force the grass out. One of the brothers then put a rubber glove on and went straight into the guy's behind in order to get the grass out. Once they got what they were after, they proceeded to knock the guy out and hang him up to send the message. It was pretty messed up and there was nothing anybody could do. I guess he learned the hard way. Story 14. Dad was in a fairly high-level prison for fraud and larceny, plus tons of priors. He was in his cell late at night and heard the cell door across from his cell open, which is odd, after lights out. He got up to see 4 large gangbangers entering with no guard in sight. The occupant of the cell was apparently a kiddie fiddler who had been convicted of some heinous crime, and the gangbangers all had kids. They destroyed that guy and unleashed crazy on him while they had him gagged with a sock. Then they violated him with a plunger and left him. Dad has no idea what happened to the guy, they never saw him again, and to this day he has no idea how they got into the cell. He contends that they had to have bribed a guard, but even then, he says, it's some real shady business. The worst part is that none of the other prisoners called out even a peep. No one wanted to help the guy, but I also think no one wanted to be the next on those guys' list either. Story 15. Oh, I got one. My friend was a former medical assistant at a local prison. She told me a pretty gross story that happened a while back. So one of the inmates, a male, was being violated by one of the commanding officers. The commanding officer made the inmate give him sloppies, and when he tried to tell someone about it, nobody believed him. So after the end of a sloppy, the inmate saved the liquid in his mouth, spit it in a napkin, and had his family send it out to get tested. And that's how the commanding officer was caught. It was on the news and everything. I'm pretty sure. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, I'm sure you'll also enjoy what are some deeply unsettling facts that you know. Story 6 is very unsettling, and I'll see you on that video.